Where's my voice file concerning the first Second Amendment argument and then the second voice file concerning the Second Amendment argument? Where are they? Who was presumptuous enough to try to submit a case for review concerning a Second Amendment argument after they made sure to file it outside of the state of Texas using what I understand to be argumentation that was actually composed in the state of Texas and was meant to be for an entirely different case? And by the way, involving entirely different asset classifications when it came to the interest of concern. What does it have to do with? Carry outside of the domicile, right? Does this have anything to do with that case concerning keeping your firearm in your vehicle and transporting it from your home to the firing range? Where's my bicycle? Where's my retirement, which is coded to the farm for maintenance for GSA vehicles? You know, you've got some very, very, very high profile implications in your infamy right now. Now, if I was a head of state, or even, I'm going to go there, even if I was the equivalent of the Attorney General, or Chief of Staff, or a National Security Advisor, and I had to give input into consideration of understanding that somewhere in another country was a highly qualified woman or man that had been remanded to practical slavery in order to effectively do little more than finance massive drug operations, which also includes the recirculation of alleged law enforcement busts for illicit drugs to be recycled through fake claims of medical treatment, including ones that are several years old, over a decade old, to pay for so-called legal drug treatment. While what she's doing in terms of actually tracking international acts of terrorism and threats to the lives of other heads of state is being used for what? He doesn't own a car. He's not qualified to drive. The options regarding the bonds and notices concerning the Texas Railroad Commission were in connection with a report I filed with the Internal Affairs Division in Houston. They were trafficking a law enforcement officer involved with internal affairs in Houston and attempting to try to solicit me to engage in acts of prostitution for what turned out to be bonds connected to the Railroad Commission. They wanted to play out some scheme where he was tied to the railroad tracks and a train full of children was coming. What was I going to do? That was a visualization at the time. They were required by law in Texas to have an open meeting, including on site. It's part of the Open Meetings Act. The governor had already released the quarantine before that meeting began. But all of a sudden, they completely violated the law when it came to matters related to what they were constitutionally required to do with the kind of rule changes they were also constitutionally required to announce before they were to be implemented. The meeting where those changes were to be discussed for implementation was not constitutionally compliant. Any changes or anything connected to the Railroad Commission since then has been unconstitutional, and they knew it. It was intentional. Not only that, but they have been engaging in illegal activity involving some form of energy offloading connected to alleged repairs associated with public listings regarding the Railroad Commission and approval through the Railroad Commission, including one with interstate commerce implications and including ones that implicate people within Texas in acts of trafficking of people performing public service roles, including in regards to law enforcement and in the practice of law in other states. Now, these matters occurred far in advance of whatever the Supreme Court of the United States did in February of this year. I contend they're absolutely 100% related. Is it having to do with who sits in the seat of this jurisdiction when it comes to assignment and remonstration for consideration before the Supreme Court of the United States? I contend it is. I believe that these sorts of matters are just cause for declaration of war. I'm on the record of saying that the sabotage and sedition ongoing in Texas and the co-conspiracy evident in the federal government of the United States demonstrates there is an intentional effort to engage acts of war against the people presumably they represent. And we have a right to exercise every means possible to protect ourselves, up to and including altering or abolishing or reforming our government as we deem expedient in the state of Texas, and also in compliance with the federal constitutional provisions regarding altering and reforming the government. Now, as I said, within the last 4 days, if an ally from another country had engaged in a proceeding where they had to address an emergency situation regarding resource access, up to and including understanding there was an illegal financial obligation that was being used against them by another country, regardless of whether that country was considered an ally or not. And the means existed to provide support, especially insofar as there may be a just cause claim to identify my country or my state as being materially relevant to the situation they're experiencing, then I already know there is a means by which to provide assistance constitutionally. However, if you have people in your own country in active conspiracy to undermine the effective functioning of government, launder money, including through their office, in relationship to their relationship to the federal government, and steal from their own people while they commit heinous crimes, it becomes very difficult to provide an adequate response to a request for support that doesn't increase the implication and the impact on other people, including those you would otherwise be an ally to or with. And there's only so much time any reasonable person can expect for other countries to be patient with our corruption. Today is another case in point. Twice, I said that I understood the individual relief connected to COVID-19 was connected to stock issues, government stock from illegally expropriated private property of the people. And I invested my government stock in my people, which also included the capacity to provide the role of an ally in consideration of the kind of assets I have as part of my family's contribution to my country and my capabilities commensurate with the need. If you didn't have a sleazy old man and his disgusting network trying to compel me to engage in acts of prostitution, that's twice in less than what? 120 hours? Very major situations around the world that have escalated to an unreasonable point could have been de-escalated, and we could have engaged an appropriate process for moving forward in accordance with pre-existing timelines that already have very substantial need for reconciliation, as well as a capacity for building on a future connected to actual legitimate development and infrastructure. But none of that is possible when you've got old people riding around playing video games with people's lives, and you sit on information like this for as long as you have. My understanding is that somebody somewhere has assessed the United States a very, very high cost for our arrogance and corruption. You absolutely refuse to act sensibly in response to these matters. What do you expect? Whatever you tried to do this morning was absolutely 100% treasonous. What I just saw, 100% unconscionable. You need to stop, or you will be stopped. Just so you know, the inventory that's already been compiled, and whatever would be the results or the yield from effective prosecution connected to the Railroad Commission, has already been committed to as part of a pre-existing arrangement. And even if other people think it's okay to traffic people from their country, including in mine, they're not going to fucking get away with it. On the other hand, there is already enough appropriated and available that with the appropriate congressional sponsorship to authorize something that would have been under other areas to be available, to make available what has been requested in those regards. But if you keep trying to launder actual weapons smuggled by actual people that you allege are migrants to fill pension quotas based on eugenics, or chemical weapons because they're illegal, and you just want to call them, what, medication? Then we have a big problem. And we have stockpiles that don't get appropriately characterized or engaged. And that makes all of your little false pretenses of supporting civil rights while you're trafficking your own fucking people for weapons deals that you let people that are completely irresponsible squander, completely treacherous. Somebody's got to pay the taxes. I've already paid over and over again. You didn't appropriately account for what has already been paid. I don't owe. My people don't owe. Who are you working for? Who are you working for that you let this happen every fucking day and nothing else gets done?